Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. My name is Shane Anderson. I'm a photographer and producer based here in New York City, and today we're going to look at 10 composition techniques we can use to make your photos even better. So the first one, it's a bit of a common one in the community, the photo community. It's called the Fibonacci Spiral. So Fibonacci Spiral, it's essentially a visual representation of a golden ratio, which is a number. So basically, this is a pattern and ratio we see a lot in nature and in life, and it's something that we learn to view as beautiful. It's something the human eye pretty generally learns to know as beautiful, and this goes back all the way in history. And as we've evolved, per se, we've been able to mathematically represent this with a ratio. It's called phi, Phi. It's a Greek symbol, but the spiral is a visual representation, and because it recurs in nature, it can look really good in your photos. So in this photo of Hazel here, there's a few examples of it I found. So first of all, the full frame, you can see it starts on her eye and kind of spirals out, touches the nose, cusps the head right here, hits the hairline, and then actually it comes back down and curves on the arm as well. So that overall lends for a really good composition. And if we zoom in a little more, again, we're starting at the eye. That's usually a good place for faces. And it goes around, it hits the edge of the eyebrow, comes across the forehead, down along the ear, and then through the collar. So again, all of these elements are lining up to fit on this spiral, which in a ratio sense is visually pleasing to the human eye. So just by looking at this photo, our eye kind of recognizes these ratio patterns, and if we can somehow put the elements in this area, we get a better composition on a photo. So the next one on the hairline here, it kind of curves around, hits perfectly through the ear inside of the hair, and then right through the center of the mouth. Again, our eyes recognize these things subconsciously. And then again, one more time on the shirt, it comes perfectly along the sleeve, goes down the sleeve, and then actually her hands like this, the spiral actually curves up one more time. So again, once you recognize these things, you can begin to manipulate them in post. So I'll get to that a little bit later with some of the other techniques, but it's really important that once you start to recognize these, you can start to manipulate them better and then include them in your compositions. So the next one is the rule of thirds. This one also kind of common. Basically, I'm going to pop up a grid real quick here for you. So basically the rule of thirds, it states that center composition isn't as visually interesting. So you'll see this grid a lot when you're trying to crop an image, for example. The lines there show where the thirds of the image are. So there's a third on top, third on the middle, third on bottom, and then third left, center, and right. So in this image here, there are these two twins I saw on the street in London, and I loved it. One was color blocked in black, the other color blocked in white, and they had this corgi with them. And I loved how they were together. Now, on first glance, you might think the figure in black, he's right in the center. That's true, but for me, the black and white together are the center. And both of them are reflected over this right third line. So they're more centered on the right side. And then this corgi down in the bottom here, I'll put my cursor there. This corgi is just in the bottommost third. So this corgi, it's drawing my eye there. So then technically, if you view it on a visual sense, let's make my thing smaller. We have a focal point here, and then we have a focal point, around this third, let's say. I'm going to change my brush color too so we can see a little bit better. So we have our focal point here and focal point here. So it's not focused in the center. It's also important to note that the faces of the talent, what you're looking at, that's in the top third as well. So that's where your eye is going to. So I'd say more specifically, it's like right here. Now this photo has another thing that's really interesting about it. Let's change my brush color again. Now that is leading lines. So if I had just photographed the talent with the background of this chain link gate there, it would be good, but these lines here that articulates back here, down this way, they direct the eye to go in this direction. So it creates depth and a little more visual interest. Now, combined with the rule of thirds, we have a focal point here at the dog, focal point here, and all the lines are directing back this way. So it's much more visually intriguing than if the subject was in the middle and with a flat background. This gives depth, and the lines are leading to the talent here. This is what they're called, leading lines. They're leading up. They're wanting your eye to look forward to the rule of third, look to the right portion of the image. So it's a very strong compositional technique as well. Now, kind of going off these lines, this next photo of Nicola we have here has a lot of parallel lines in it, right? Now, Nicola, she's pretty much dead center, and center composition can be good sometimes, but in a lot of cases, it's not as great. But here, if you see, there's a lot of parallel lines that are actually providing almost a frame for Nicola. I'm just drawing them in here right now for you. And they almost, well, they frame her up. So even though she's in the center, it doesn't matter so much. My eye is directly going to Nicola because these lines, essentially they're creating, at least for me, it's almost like they're full. But instead, they're full of texture, so there's some more lines. And these lines are also kind of pointing towards Nicola, aren't they? So all things are saying, look at me right here. So even if your composition is centered, it's almost like there's blinders here, and we're just looking at Nicola here on the stoop dancing. So parallel lines and blocking off areas is also a really good way to get that composition effect. Now, a lot of these things, like I said, they're what your eye is processing and what it kind of does psychologically. So let's move on to this next one to Maurizio. We're going to kind of go down the path of repeating patterns again. So, for example, this background here, it has lots of repeating curls. Lots of repeating curls, right? Well, that's great. It gives my eye something to look at. And another great thing about this image is if you notice, everything is brown or beige or a shade of it. So these blocks in front here, the background pattern, it's a brown squiggle with beige. And the talent, Maurizio, he's a master chef in Italy. He's wearing all black with a few highlights of yellow and red. Now, why does this work? Because your eye is drawn to the black and the red, and everything else is brown, so it kind of creates like almost a world around Maurizio here, and you're just automatically looking at him, because again, he's the only thing that's really colored, because you're setting the tone for the image is brown, so you put something that's red and yellow and black in there, your eye's popping. And I like this photo especially because there's a lot of texture if you zoom in here on his chef shirt, and it's almost like these squiggles here, it's almost like they're repeating in the background. So repeating patterns in images and clothing texture is a really good way to combine the image into a strong composition. Now we're going to continue again a little bit further on the shapes. So if you look at this image of Hillary in New York City, you automatically, at least I do, I see these triangle shapes. Now these are pretty obvious triangles, right? There's ones on the floor that kind of lead up, triangles. But what I want you to look at is what are the shapes that maybe you don't see immediately. And they're still triangles, but they're a little bit more hidden. So her posing, if you look, has lots of little triangles hidden in the joints, even here between the legs. And those reinforce mentally on the back end the triangles that are already here. So it's like we have triangles within, again, our background. But there's even something bigger at play that I love here. Again, this whole leg shape for me is a triangle. There's another one here. And if we really want to get big picture about it, if we look, this is a line. This is almost a line for a triangle. And then her feet connect. It's like a big triangle here. And then this arm going down, this arm going down, creates another triangle. So we almost have like a very cinched waist, even though that's not the case. This looks like a dress, you know, here's the top of the dress, here's the bottom of the dress, here's the head, and we've been able to create that just with her posing and some lines. So we have triangles all throughout the posing of our talent Hillary, and also throughout the background, so that really creates almost just a field of triangles throughout the image, which maybe you don't even visually see, but your brain might recognize and say, ooh, something's intriguing about this, why do I like it? And it's because there's little hidden things in the composition with shapes. Another good tip for this is S-curves. S-curves are typically a little bit more soft, a little bit more traditionally what you would call feminine. But just like it would suggest, they're just S-curves, and this image is full of them. So you can make one through the hair. There's an S there. There's one in the background, which is very intentional. I mean, this is an S-curve just here. This dress, it doesn't give the full picture, but I'd like to imagine there's another curve going down. You could even do one here going off her cheekbone through there. I mean, you could honestly even go through here and define this as one. But as you see these curves, they just reinforce each other. This isn't an S here, but this kind of, it groups. It's like a little helmet to all these little S's we've created here. So once you combine these images together and these lines, it creates something very soft about the photo. Kind of on the same thought process, there's something called Z lines, or Z curves is what I call them. It's basically an S curve but more pointy, so a little bit more traditionally masculine, strong, as opposed to soft with an S. So here in this photo of Nicola, again, we can see a whole bunch. You could go as macro as micro as you like. I mean, this is the top of one for me, then it goes down her leg, and it could stop here. That's one. I like to see one in this foot here. Here's one. Here's the middle part of the Z, and here it is again. That can be one. You could go here. That's a Z. So they're really all throughout this image, and when you stack elements on top of each other, they really create a very nice angular and purposeful feel to it, even if you didn't mean to. Okay, so that's that one. And the last thing I want to talk about, 9 and 10, are combining these together. So what do you see here? I would probably see parallel lines, first of all, coming off. Let me go on the right layer. So obviously we have lots of these lines going through the whole image that are very leading. It provides a solid environment for this photograph. But what cuts that? What makes it different? Well, if you see Thomas here, he sat here, his position is completely opposite to these lines. He sat in the parallel lines, but his seat is perpendicular. His legs, again, perpendicular. His feet, perpendicular. His gaze, perpendicular. So even though we have all this motion going in one direction, the figure is completely opposite, which for me is nice. And for me, this is why I centered this. I played a lot with this crop. I tried putting him in the corner, top, bottom, but in the end, I chose to do centered because, well, I like how he just definitely cuts the space in the middle of all of these parallel lines. Now, the other thing you might have not noticed here is a Fibonacci spiral, which is very subtle, but let's pop up the diagram. His whole body is actually just this perfect spiral. So it starts under his arm and spirals out perfectly along the back and down to the bottom of the feet. Now, I'm going to be very honest and say that when I first made this image, his back was not this curved at all. It was a lot more straight, but when I saw the opportunity to add this, I thought, let's curve the back to perfectly match this, so there's some sort of intrigue in this image. So once you start noticing these patterns, you can use your post-processing tools to better adapt. Also with the photo with Hillary and the triangles, let's go back to that one. This whole background, I have a video of me retouching it. If you want to see, I'll put it in the little I description. This whole background, it's composited in. And why did I do that? Because I see the triangles and I want to replicate. So I added these triangles in to enforce that pattern so the viewer maybe catches on to that. And it's very important to catch on to these things because there's so many mathematical principles like math theory and behind triangles, Fibonacci spirals that go into composition. So I think it's a real disservice to not consider these things when you're composing an image, especially with the tools we have. So let's look into our last combination, another one of Hillary. I can't type correctly. This one has a lot of S-curves and also a Fibonacci spiral as well. So for me, I really love this earring, but it's not only a curve here, but it actually curves into the hand, which I love. That's a really great curve for me. And you can do a similar one going up into the hand. That's like an S. You also have a Fibonacci in the earring. Let's zoom in. I'm going to remove those S-curves. You can see it also has that spiral to it. Amazing design on that part. And then we also have one in the eye here. So you can see, and the eye is a really good place for them in faces, I found. So it kind of cuts on the very top of the eyelid, zooms, perfectly hits the eyebrow, top of head, and goes down the chin. So the big takeaway from this for me, I would hope you get, is that you should try looking more into your photos and seeing if you have used any of these composition tools that you didn't even know. Because once you become aware of what you're using, you can then start to use them intentionally. Because our human eye, it picks up on a lot of things and does a lot of things by itself. But once you start noticing, oh, I tend to capture these curves, oh, I tend to capture these spirals, then you become aware, and then you're able to manipulate these inconsistencies and make them consistent and on purpose in your work, which can really help to develop your style. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you learned a little bit more about art theory and how the composition and math portions behind it is very helpful in this sense. If you did, please do subscribe to the channel and like the video. I do lots of retouching content as well as career building advice for if you're working in the photography industry. If you want to look at my professional work, please do catch up on my Instagram. It's @thatstylishnerd. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.